Hello, this is Corey Tabor, founder and president of Triple I Coaching, where we are informing, instructing, and inspiring you to fulfill your purpose. Today on our Thirsty Thursday video podcast, we're going to be talking about the events that have occurred over the last couple of weeks with the death of George Floyd at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer and the protests that have been happening around our nation. And we'll talk even more about the role that white allies have in being able to help move the ball down the field, so to speak, when it comes to racial reconciliation. If you don't know a lot about me, my background, I grew up in Abilene, which is a town that is less than 10% Black, and grew up in a predominantly white school and experienced a lot of challenges on the front end as a nerd and someone who really wasn't very known or accepted, so to speak, and then grew into a leader on campus, a student body president, homecoming king, speech team president. And all of that happened in the context of being in close relationships with people from the white community. And as I came to college and went to the University of Texas, I had my first African-American teacher. I took my first class on African-American history, and I began to understand the importance and value of my culture. For so long, I felt like I had pushed it down in order to thrive or survive, so to speak, in my environment. And so I went through a process of ethnic identity development and began seeing that my life positioned me well to do racial reconciliation and to be a bridge builder. And so I'm grateful for the relationships that I've had, and I'm grateful for the opportunity I have now to partner with friends of mine who are helping to bring about reconciliation within the body of Christ, within the society as a whole. Honestly, I've been very hurt and saddened by the loss of George Floyd. It has hit me harder than many of the other deaths that we've seen at the hands of police officers. And I think in part because of how much it was in our face. I mean, we literally watched him leave the planet. We watched him call for his mother, and we watched him die. And I think the amount of pride I saw in the officer's face, the amount of apathy I saw with those who were standing around, not those who were videotaping, but the other police officers. And my brain just went to, wow, this could have been me. This could have been my brother. This could have been my dad. And so what I've learned in my years of working through reconciliation work over the last 20 years is that this is not something that can be done by Black people alone. Until people who don't look like us speak out on this issue, we're not going to see the change that we need to see. And that's something I've been excited about in the protests that I've seen, how many people of every ethnicity background are standing up. People all over the world are speaking up and saying we're better than this. And so I'm excited today to bring in my friend, Haley Byrnes, who I've worked with in the past, and we'll share a little bit of our story. Haley and I worked together at a pregnancy center here in Austin, ran a sex ed program together, and we'll talk a little bit about our journey and our experience, but I want to welcome Haley to the show, Thirsty Thursday. Thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story as an ally who is, as I think you will admit, not where you want to be, but you're definitely on the journey and growing in it. So greet our guest today and share a little bit about how you're feeling about what's going on with reconciliation in our world today.
Thank you so much for having me, Corey. This is such an honor to be talking with you today. You are one of my greatest teachers in this journey that I'm on and have been for years. And so I'm just so grateful for you. This has been a really difficult time for me as well. I have been lots of emotions, so lots of sadness, lots of anger and even rage, I would call it, lots of confusion, and just a deep sadness that can almost feel hopeless at times. And so just lots of emotions. And one thing I really feel the desire to do right now at the stage of the journey I'm on is to have conversations. And so I've been having lots of conversations, mainly with white people that are friends and family members that are new to this journey. So I'm talking with a lot of white people right now that we're kind of aware that social justice and racial justice and racism was the thing. Like they kind of knew that, but had never really thought about it very much. And so are facing that for the first time right now on a deep level. And just because of what you mentioned, like we watched him be killed. And so it's just waking a lot of white people up right now, is what I'm witnessing in peers. And I'm grateful that I woke up to this several years ago. And so I've had some time to process. And so it's been really a blessing to me to walk through that with some of my friends and family members who are, I mean, they've been aware of it, so I don't want to say that they never thought about it, but it's the first time I hear them all talking about it. And so it's just engaging in those conversations, and getting to talk to you about it today is, I'm really looking forward to how we can use these emotions we're feeling and this trauma that we've all kind of experienced to move forward and to create change.
Definitely. I mean, I like you, have been having a lot of friends reach out to me and say, hey, what can I do? I want to do something. And I think in the past, people saw it, but it didn't hit them the way this has hit them, and they're wanting to do something. And so I appreciate the reality that people are ready to do something. And, you know, I'm leading a book group that you're going to be a part of, and some of my other friends are a part of, just to begin to equip and have conversations around it. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what started your journey on racial reconciliation.
So some of my background, I grew up in a small town too. The town I grew up in was a small town in Kansas that was mainly white. I don't know the stats because I moved away in high school, but I would guess 95% white. I knew very few people of color growing up. And so that was kind of that experience. And then I moved to Dallas, Texas in high school. And that was very different. My high school was about half black, half white. And my junior year, I was selected for a group called Peer Helpers. And it was really intentional in getting a variety of kids together that were considered leaders among their peers. And we had a class together. So we met every day and we talked about a lot of things. We read a lot of things. We discussed a lot of things. And we represented our school. And so both in, you know, being their age, but also it was a very good representation of about half of us were white and half of us were black. And that was a huge moment. I didn't know the term reconciliation at that point, but we started having conversations. We started noticing how in a lot of these classes, it's mainly white kids. A lot of these classes are mainly black kids. We noticed at lunchtime, most of the black kids sat in this room, most of the white kids sat in this room. We were just noticing things and we didn't like it, right? So we were trying to create change, and we would sit with each other. We would try to do different things. And I'm just so grateful for that experience, because it gave me some really great friends. It started me having relationships and just getting to listen to different perspectives and starting to learn. So that's really where that started for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a similar experience noticing, like in my honors classes, not very many black students were there. And when we would go to the cafeteria, we would kind of hang with our friends. And then as I got to college, I started seeing even more of that. There's a book that's been written, you know, why do all the black kids sit in the cafeteria together? And it talks a lot about just the kind of relationships and connections that are built, and even the ethnic identity development that happens as a result of that. So I noticed for me and my friends, I had a best friend in high school and middle school who was Hispanic and another who was white. And we would go to different churches, but all week we spend time together. And I always ask myself the question, why are we going to different churches? Until I realized that there is a high possibility something would be said at my church that would be offensive to each of them, and the same was true for them. And so I started getting this heart for reconciliation to see, particularly in the body of Christ, people come together and connect But I'm realizing some of the challenges that have happened with that is the ways that we worship are unique based upon the ways that we're wired and created. And so that's been part of what I've seen as a challenge in that situation. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And something that, sorry to interrupt you, something that resonated when you were talking, and it kind of got me more involved down this, was college. So we both went to UT. Okay.
Welcome.
Not at different times because you're a little bit older than me. But I took a class, I was an English major, and I took a couple classes. One that really stands out to me was African American literature. And that was a profound opening experience for me. It was taught by just a smart, powerful, beautiful African American woman, and it was just a great experience. But when you were talking about the classes you took, that was a huge part for me too, was taking classes and reading books and writing papers and actually studying this group of people that I had not learned that much about previously in my education. So that was a huge moment for me in getting me kind of more involved, is just learning. And that's been a big part of it. When you mentioned that, that was just huge for me and kind of helping me go in that direction more.
Yeah, that's something that I realized when I started taking that class in school. I was thinking, it's African American history. It's going to be the easiest class I've ever taken in my life because I'm an African American. But it was one of the most challenging classes because in our American history classes, we're not taught a lot about African American history. Mostly what I learned was slavery, sharecropping, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Underground Railroad, maybe, but there wasn't a lot about the positive things that were in our culture, the ways that we have made an impact in the world, and many of the things that we as a culture had established. So when you think about your experiences and becoming an ally, which I think is so vital and important, what steps have you taken that have helped you become an ally of people of color, specifically the Black community?
So we just mentioned learning and the importance of learning things, which I'm still learning. So that's a step that just never ends for me. I'm a lifelong learner, and that's something that I think has really helped me in this process of being an ally, is I know that there's way more that I don't know than what I do know. And so that humility has really helped me a lot. I think when we go into this thinking we know a lot and we have a lot to bring to the table, it's a dangerous place to be because there's so much to learn, especially as white people, when we're talking about race and talking about white culture. That's like the water we swim in. So that's like a fish trying to study the water and see the water that's around it. And it takes a long time to even see it because it's just your normal, it's everything you know. And so learning is huge, and learning different perspectives, reading books, listening to podcasts, watching movies is different. The biggest thing for me though is relationships, because I am in a relational being. I love being friends with people. I love being a fan of people. And so what has kept me in this are my friendships, because I have made friendships with people of color. And so when I hear statistics, when I hear stories, I'm not just thinking of this group of people, I'm thinking of my friends. I'm thinking of people that I love and who love me. And that's what keeps me in it, right? Is I can't get out of it because there are people I love that are being hurt. And so I have to join with them, and I have to, when they're sad, I want to be sad with them. When they're excited, I want to be excited with them. And so that's a huge step for me, is just relationships. And again, like learning, it never ends, right? Because relationships take work. If you don't work on it, then it's not going to grow. And also there's always new people you're meeting. And so forming relationships and being really intentional about that is a huge step for me.
Yeah, I always say that relationships lead to reconciliation. It's really hard for someone to deny the reality of the information they're engaging when that reality is connected to a relationship. So when people talk about folks who dealt with addiction, if you've had people in your family who've dealt with addiction, you don't dismiss it because you understand how real that is. Or if you've had family members who have been incarcerated, you understand how mass incarceration impacts the community. Or like for me, I've got friends who are white and who are Latino and who are Asian who care about this issue of race. And so when people say all white people don't care, or when they say, Asians don't really care, or if they say, Latinos don't understand, I can say, no, that's not true, because I know people who have had these experiences. And so it's so important to build relationships. And I'm appreciative we had the opportunity through the job that we had to start building a relationship and having conversations around race and culture. It was a really kind of interesting time in our world, because when I came on, it was 2012. So this is an election year. I believe Barack Obama had won in 2008. He was up again for election in 2018. And so there were all kinds of conversations around politics and race and culture. And I began sharing the reality of my journey. Others who I was working with began sharing the reality of our journey. And I think that was a part of you being able to step even deeper into the journey of reconciliation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one thing that as I built relationships and as I learned, I started just finding great joy in being around people that were not like me. So being around people that were different and being around people with different cultural backgrounds, different beliefs, different histories, different views of the world, different political views, I just started enjoying engaging in those conversations and learning from people that are different than me. And so it really almost started bothering me when I walked in a room and I only saw white people. That was a bummer. I was like, oh, okay, this is something I need to work on, right? Like if I walk in, if I'm part of a group, whether it's like a class, a church, a hobby, right? If I walk in and all I'm seeing is white people, I started noticing it and it kind of started bumming me out. And that was a big moment for me. And so I'm so grateful for when you and I became friends, because we got to work together and we got to intentionally build a very diverse team of people. And that's something we both really valued. And so getting to talk through those things and getting to hear your experiences and I learned so much from you. And there were several other friends of ours that we all worked together. And as we were training together in the type of work we were doing, talking with teenagers, you talk a lot about yourself and you get to know each other really well. And so getting to know your cultural background and sharing mine. And we had an Asian American that was on the team. We had several African Americans that were on the team, a couple white people, and I am still friends with several of them. And that was a very transformative time for me, because you were willing to trust me with telling me stories of what it's like to grow up as a Black man in America and in Texas. And so that was just a huge honor for me. It was very eye-opening, and I loved that job for that reason. I loved getting to talk about it with you.
Yeah, it was a great experience. And I feel like when we work with people from different backgrounds, when we worship with people of different backgrounds, live around people of different backgrounds, we should take advantage of the gift that they are, that their experiences are a gift that we can share. I remember I had a mentor talk to me when I came on staff doing college ministry at UT, and I was the only African-American in the whole region. And he said, if you don't bring all of you are to the table, you are denying them the gift of who you are as Corey, the African-American male. And I was like, wow, I had never thought about it, because so much of growing up for me was about assimilating. so that I wouldn't like rock the boat. He said, you know, you have an opportunity to let these people learn to love who you are. And through that, they're going to be able to identify and advocate for and provide a level of support and empathy that is necessary for us to move forward as a community. And so as you think about where you are in your journey, what do you wish you had known when you started this journey of racial reconciliation and working through racial justice and those type of things?
That's such a hard question to answer because there's so much I didn't know. So, I mean, I could like go on and on about the things that I wish I had known. Probably the main thing I would want to communicate is that in learning these things, and especially when talking to people about their life experiences, it's important to really just listen with the goal of understanding. So really hearing a person instead of trying to decide, I don't know, not thinking too much about like how getting defensive or getting almost making judgments about whether I agree with that or don't agree with that. It doesn't matter at that point. Like it's just absorbing information and honoring them by listening to their story and their life and their experience. And who am I to say if that experience, I can't judge that experience at all because it wasn't my experience. It was this other person's. So that's a huge thing that I wish I had really known better, because I think a lot of times when you're learning new things, you're just trying to like decipher what's true, what's not true, how do I sift through this? But when it comes to reconciliation, the goal really needs to be to understand. And that doesn't always mean agree with everything, but to understand and to respect what they've been through. And just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? So there's a lot of stuff that goes down I've never seen with my eyes, but I fully believe has happened. And I think that's a really important thing to start with as an ally, is to listen to understand. And the other thing that we can get more into later is learning how to hold sadness with people and anger with people. I think, I'm not sure if it's a white person thing or if it's an American thing. I don't know, but I've been taught to always try to get back to the positive really fast. So when someone's grieving, when someone's hurting, to like give them a hug, but then try to cheer them up. And that is not helpful here. And I wish I would have known that earlier, that I need to learn how to be sad with someone and how to be angry with someone, and that I don't need to cheer them up. I can just let them experience that emotion. I can join them in that emotion, and I can be sad and be angry with them. And that's usually a lot more helpful than trying to cheer them up, is because again, it's helping them feel heard and understood. Like, you hear my sadness and you're being sad with me. And so that's something I wish I would have learned earlier.
Yeah, I think it's so important to listen, like you said, to understand and not to respond. I think it's a natural proclivity to say, well, let me explain why it is this way, or let me help you understand why we do this. And that can be defensive, and that happens in all relationships. I mean, it happens between husbands and wives, it happens between parents and children. But when you think about it, when you're able to do that, you can remove your kind of self from the experience, from getting what you need from it and really providing for that person what they need. And as you talked about the importance of being able to, validate what's happening, there's a lot of quantitative data out there, but there's a lot of qualitative data as well. And experiences are facts as well. That's what people have been through. And when they share that with you, that's a gift that they're giving you to let you know, hey, I trust you with this, and I want you to understand where I'm coming from. It's so important for white brothers and sisters to really be in that place of empathizing and asking yourself, what would it be like to be in this position? Like if I lose if somebody loses their grandmother, I'm not going to say, oh, she was 95 anyway. You know what I'm saying? At least she lived a long life. And I'm a very positive, optimistic person. And so I have to be careful in my own self-care to think, okay, Corey, don't move past the pain to get to the positive, be in the pain, because that's the reality of where it is. Otherwise, it'll hit you later on because you haven't really processed the anger and the grief that you've had. So those are great things to share, to listen, to understand, to be able to be with people. You know, in scripture, it teaches us to mourn with those who mourn and rejoice with those who rejoice. And I think that can apply to anybody. You want people to be there with you in that moment. So what would be your recommendation for, you know, other white people who are starting the journey of reconciliation? What would you recommend to them as they begin this journey?
Definitely to form relationships. So, and I was talking to a good friend of mine this week about this, and she said, Haley, it's so awkward because I don't want to like go up to people and try to be their friend just because they're not white. Like that seems wrong. And I get that. And I've heard that from several people. And I think I've felt that at times too. And I think that kept me from putting myself out there sometimes, is that kind of fear of not wanting this person to feel like a token Black friend or a token Asian friend or a token, right? But I don't want the fear of that to keep us from doing it, because we naturally as humans, I think we naturally will go to people that are like us, right? That it's more comfortable. So it's just natural for us to gravitate towards people that look like us, that act like us, that talk like us. And so we have to really intentionally not do that. It takes effort and it takes thought, and it is awkward. And sometimes it doesn't go great, but a lot of times it does. And so my girls started elementary school, and when we were looking at elementary schools, my oldest is in kindergarten this past year, and my next one is starting kindergarten next year. Bless it all. And so when we were choosing schools, that was important to us. We wanted a school where they weren't all white kids and weren't all white families. And so we found, thankfully, the district we're in and the school in our neighborhood is a really diverse school. And so that helped so much in just like when I go to parent meetings, I don't sit at a table with all the white moms, right? I try to not do that. Now, sometimes I see a friend and I sit with her, but I can talk to her later. So I really try to go sit by a mom that's a different color than me and get to experience that meeting with her, get to talk to her. When my kids do soccer teams, right, to try to befriend the mom, the parents that aren't white. And it does feel a little weird, but I try, and I genuinely appreciate having friends that aren't white. It's something I really value. And so that is attractive to me, right? Like when I see other parents, when I see kids, when I see families that aren't white, I want to be their friend because I want friends like that. And so it's a genuine thing for me. And I back that up by being a good friend. So it's not a token thing. It's not I'm checking a box with you. It's like, okay, I'll pick your kids up from school and drop them off. Let's get together and have a drink. Let's talk about this. I'll give you a call on your birthday. We'll go do something fun when you're stressed, you know? So I just want to be a good friend to them, and they've been such good friends to me. And so just that relationship and putting yourself out there is just really something I want to encourage my fellow white people to do, even if it feels awkward. It's to just let it be awkward. Like if it's awkward, that's okay. Just work through that and just genuinely try to get to know this person. And it'll change things for you. And that's good. It needs to be changed. The other thing that I've really learned just in life, I think, is learning how to hold like good things and bad things at the same time. So for example, right now I am pregnant. That's a good thing. My mom has cancer. That's a bad thing. Both of these things are happening at the same time in my life. And being pregnant does not make my mom's cancer less hard, and her having cancer does not make being pregnant less good, right? I have to learn how to hold both of those. And when you're talking about racism and the work of fighting for justice, is we need to hold things at the same time. So we need to be able to hold, yes, a lot of good work has been done in the last 100 years, right? There's been a lot of good things that generations before us have achieved. That's good. And there's a lot more work to do, right? There's a lot that is not done yet that we need to pick up, and we need to do this work. And that bad of the racial injustice and the systemic racism that exists does not make the work that previous generations did less good, right? We needed them to do that. That had to happen first. Like, that needed to happen. And now we have work to do. And so we need to be able to hold both of these things, right? And I think that's a big part of this work for white allies, is to be able to hold both the good and the bad and move forward and keep doing the work that we're needing to do right now.
Definitely. I mean, I look at it in three phases when I talk about reconciliation work. One is the personal relationships, you know, being able to kind of have a shared story that, okay, I'm married, you're married, you know, then you have these shared experiences that you form that allow you to kind of build some relational equity, but it goes from the personal to like organizationally. So where we work together, you know, you saw me as a person who could take the role you were in as a director. And you said, Corey's qualified for this position. He happens to be an African-American. He doesn't need more qualifications, he needs opportunity. And so you chose to give me that opportunity to direct, and you chose to work for me and kind of switch the tables, which I think is a part of the organizational change that needs to happen. I've been seeing a lot of companies come out with these Black Lives Matter statements, which are great, but when you look at the organizational structures, they're completely white. And the only person in executive leadership is a diversity position that is kind of set to deal with diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so I think that's important. So you go from the personal to the organizational, and then eventually we got to move to the systemic. And that's, I think, what people are seeing now is that not only can we change our personal lives, which I think people have been doing for a number of years, and we can start to make adjustments in our organizational lives, which are needed now, but we have to start addressing the systemic issues, which are the numbers of African Americans who are impoverished due to a lack of financial equity in our society, from redlining, from a lack of an ability to get a loan for a home, for people who haven't been taught financial education, people who haven't had access to quality education, making a decision to look at our hiring practices and look at our criminal justice system and look at all the systems that have been built to make the world better for white people. Those are things that are going to have to change. And I think that the reason allies are so important is because right now they're in positions of power. And so they can use their voice to do like what you did with our organization and say, hey, I see people who are qualified, who can move into these roles of leadership that can begin to change the narrative and add their experience and bring value to our organization and to our nation and our world. And so that's something that I would encourage white allies to think about. When you're looking to hire, ask yourself, can I hire diversely? Can I interview more candidates? Can I look in different places for candidates? Am I just talking to my friends' kids, if you're a C-level executive, or am I looking at schools that are diverse and looking at organizations that are diverse in order to be able to bring that to the table? Talk more about that for you and kind of what that was like for you as a leader, making a decision to kind of give people the opportunity to rise up.
I was thinking about this the other day, and I still remember going into our executive director's office and telling her I would like to replace myself with Corey. And she was like, well, that is not something I've ever heard before. Like, I've never had anyone say, like, I've had people quit or resign. I've had people take different jobs. I've had people want to get a better job here, but I've never had someone come in and say, I'm wanting to switch places. I'm wanting this person who I supervise to become my supervisor. I'm wanting him to take my job and me to take his job. And so she laughed, and she wasn't laughing in a mean way. It was just kind of a shocking thing. And I think, and I've said this for many years, that's the best thing I did at my time at that organization, is I saw in you, I saw someone, I knew we needed someone who was going to stick around for more than a couple years, because we had a really high turnover in that position, and I wanted consistency. And I saw that in you. I saw that this is someone who could do this for 5 years, this 6 years, and I wanted that for the organization. And I also wanted diversity in the leadership of the organization, because at the time the leadership was all white. And so I wanted to see diversity in the leadership, and also other organizations like it were mainly white also. And so the leadership was mainly white. So I wanted, I just saw that as a problem. I saw that as like, we're missing a lot here. We're missing a lot. We need someone at the table that's making conversations that is not white. We need that. And so, and then also you're older than me. You have had more work experience than me. In many ways, you were more qualified than I was to do that job. And there were parts of the job that at the time I really felt like I wasn't meeting, and I saw that they were strengths of yours. And so your ability to handle people that are angry or frustrated and navigate that is really impressive. And so you have amazing skills that fit you for the job too. And so, yeah, I'm so grateful. And that's one of, if I could put that on a resume, I would. Like, that was a proud moment for me. And then I got to stay around for a while and help you be successful. And you didn't need a lot of training because you already knew what to do, but I got to support you in your leadership, and I got to listen to you and help you in accomplishing things that you were wanting to do. And so that was just such a gift for me too, that I got to watch you lead and got to be a part of that.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've been seeing a lot as people have talked about kind of bringing about equity and access is a lot of people are mentoring people of color, but not a lot of people are investing in people of color. And not only, so people say, well, I'll mentor you, I'll help you, I'll support you. But then for you, and for me, it was a financial decision as well, because you were choosing to make less money. I needed to make more money, and you were making that financial choice as well. So I think that's really important for people to be willing to give access to people who haven't had access. Again, people who are qualified to be able to do so. And I think from that, I've been able to go on and lead, in this same arena on a state level, now on a national level. I'm doing a seminar in September at a national training for people who get grants to do sex education. And all of that happened because you said, I'm willing to give this person access. It was a world I didn't even really know about. Boards that I've sat on all opened up because you opened that door for me. And so for all of my white brothers and sisters out there, know that your legacy can be more than just acquiring for you. It can be giving access to someone who can really improve not only your current organization, but kind of society as a whole. So we're going to wrap up our conversation here, but I want to thank you so much for being on Thirsty Thursday. I'm looking forward to having more conversations and doing more trainings and development for people who are wanting to grow in this area, because I believe that, you know, as allies and partners in this journey, we can really help a lot of people, you know, make a significant change. So you have any final words you want to say before we roll?
I'm just so grateful to be alive right now. I'm going to nerd out for a minute. There's a musical I listen to a lot called Hamilton, and there's a phrase in it that says, "Look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now." And I feel like that at the moment. It's hard right now, and there's so much pain, but all of that pain, all of that hardness, it was already here. We just weren't looking at it. And so this is about so much more than George Floyd. He is, I mean, I'm still grieving that. He is a human being that was killed in a terrible way. And so I don't want to downplay that at all. But he's one of many, many, many countless people who have suffered, lost their lives because of these systems that are broken. And so that people are waking up to that and realizing it, and that they're wanting to take action. I was talking to my brother last night about empathy. Empathy is really important, but empathy that does not lead to compassion and does not lead to action is useless. So if my empathy doesn't cause me to act differently towards someone, then I might as well not have empathy. So we can't stop at feeling for someone. This empathy needs to lead us somewhere. So it needs to lead us to compassion for that person and to act for that person, to try to seek justice, to try to seek reconciliation. And that means having a lot of hard conversations that us white folks would rather not have, but we need to do it. And so I think my ending thought would be, whoever's watching this, there's probably a conversation that you need to have, and you know the one I'm talking about because it's the one you're thinking like, oh man, I really don't want to, but have the conversation, go to that person, listen to them, ask them to listen to you, and just try to have the conversation. And we have to keep trying that. We have to keep trying to have the conversation.
Definitely. I mean, I'm so glad we have had the opportunity to have so many good conversations and are working together to change what we see in the world. Here's the reality. A famous quote often said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." Right now, white people, we need you to stand up. We need you to speak up. We need you to do for us what we have done for you. This nation was built on the backs of Black people. And we need the transformation of our culture today to happen in part as you stand up in your positions of leadership, as you stand up in your family, as you stand up in your church, as you stand up on your job, as you stand up in our civic engagement systems, because they're not listening to us. So if you can connect with, build relationships with, and advocate for people of color, you're going to be able to change the world and make it what you want your kids to experience, which is a world where people are, as Martin Luther King said, treated by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. It doesn't mean that color isn't important, because I believe our culture is important. A colorblind society does not help us, but we need to also be given the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to be all of who we are as a result. And that's going to start with people giving opportunities to folks who look like me. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today for our Thirsty Thursday conversation. Please go to the website, CoreyTabor.com/TT, to see this and other conversations we've had, and we will be having more conversations in the coming weeks around the issues of racial reconciliation and how do we build allies in our community.